Let's find out what the Catalan opening is. It begins d4, knight f6, c4, e6, and now the Catalan move is g3. The Catalan can actually be reached by many different move orders, but it's characterized by white having his pawns on c4 and d4, and the bishop on the king side is fianchettoed. Okay, play normally proceeds d5, although c5 is also possible here. Now after d5, you can see it looks like a queen's gambit declined, but with the move g3 played. Okay, white follows up by fianchettoing his bishop, and now black is at a crossroads. He can play either the closed variation with bishop to e7, which I think is the main line, or he can play the open defense by taking on c4. If you play the open defense, you're allowing white to recover the pawn immediately with queen to a4 check, forking the king and the c4 pawn. Then black needs to respond with knight b d7 to block the check. Other blocks don't work. If the knight comes to c6, black can capture twice on c6 and win a pawn. And if the bishop blocks, then black has left defense of the b7 pawn. So knight b d7 is forced, and then white can recover the pawn. And this is one possible way of playing. But the main line is the closed variation, which is the move bishop to e7 here. And black intends to castle before taking on c4 so that white won't have the move queen to a4 check. So play proceeds knight f3, both players castle, and then black plays d takes c4, which looks like a strange move to me. This Catalan bishop now looks stronger that diagonal has been opened. But in the Queen's Gambit decline, many times black does take on c4 to relieve himself of a weakness on d5. And he follows it up with the move c5. Alright, white does want to regain his pawn, so he tries queen to c2 in the main line. Another possible move is knight to e5, also pressuring c4. But let's look at queen c2. Well, the main line continues a6 with the intent of playing b5. But there is a possibility of playing b5 right away. If black does that, white should undermine the b5 point with the move a4. The b5 pawn cannot be guarded. This is similar to what you see in the Queen's Gambit accepted. You can't push to a6 to guard the pawn because a takes b5, and the rook on a8 is hanging. You also don't want to play c6 because a takes b5, c takes b5 opens the diagonal for the Catalan bishop, which is pointed at that rook. So black will normally push the pawn forward to b4. Now rather than taking on c4 immediately with the queen, which can run into the move bishop to a6, white will play a knight to d2, such as knight f d2. Knight b d2 is also a possibility, but knight f d2 is very sharp because it immediately opens up the bishop, which attacks the rook, and black will normally play c6. Play will proceed from here. The d pawn is hanging, but the c pawn is hanging as well. Alright, so back to the main line. After queen c2, black plays a6 in preparation to play b5. So white doesn't let him get that move in. He takes on c4 immediately, and then black plays b5 to expand on the queen side and get this bishop to b7 to counteract that Catalan bishop. The queen falls back to its natural square c2, where it eyes the important e4 square. Then bishop b7, and bishop d2 is a subtle move that grandmasters have played. And the point is to wait for black to play his knight from b to d2, and then play bishop to a5. And the bishop will be pinning the c pawn to the queen. The c pawn naturally wants to come forward to c5 to attack white's center. White does wait for Black's knight to commit itself to d7, because if he plays bishop to a5 with the knight still at home, then black can play knight to c6, driving the bishop away. All right, we'll end our initial introductory discussion of the Catalan here, and we hope to make more videos on this opening in the future. Thanks for watching.